On this Sunday night, a bizarre, deadly attack in Peru. A Canadian man lynched in a remote region of the Amazon rainforest. A friend tells CBC News Sebastian Woodruff travels south in search of personal growth and enlightenment. Instead, it appears he fell victim to an angry, vengeful mob. Why did they target him?
Also tonight, a Liberal MP accused of sexual assault. Francis Drouin says he is cooperating with police and no charges have been laid. But how will the party respond? This is The National.
An adventure to a deep corner of the Amazon jungle has turned deadly for a British Columbia man. And tonight, police in Peru are investigating the murder of Sebastian Woodruff, hunted down and killed by a mob which believed he was responsible for the death of a respected tribal elder. As Natalie Collada tells us, among the lines of investigation now being followed, Woodruff may have been wrongly targeted.
This gruesome series of events began Thursday when Olivia Alvarado Lomas was shot to death at her home. The Shipibo Conobo elder was a revered traditional healer, spiritual leader, and indigenous rights activist. It's not clear who killed her, but quickly rumors spread targeting a Canadian.
The relatives of the woman distributed a flyer with a picture of a Canadian citizen and a name. The police hasn't confirmed yet that he was in fact the person who murdered the woman.
But that didn't seem to matter. The man in the flyer, reported as Canadian Sebastian Woodruff, was lynched by a local mob. His murder filmed, circulated online, too disturbing for us to show. His body then partially buried. His remains were found Saturday by police.
Hello, my name's Sebastian.
Woodruff came from British Columbia and documented much of his personal journey on the web.
I just decided to just drop what I was doing and I'm going to make a career change to become an addictions counselor.
The father of one set up this crowdfunding campaign to go to the remote area of Peru to study the healing properties of herbs of the Shipibo culture, writing, "My personal pledge is that I will learn, retain, and share this knowledge." A friend tells us Woodruff went to the area several times to experiment with ayahuasca, a hallucinogenic plant.
A good number of his community here were really trying to help him come back and ground into the fact that he was a father and had a family and had purpose here, and should stay away from going down there.
Yarrow Willard said his friend had a big personality, was seeking deeper meaning, and wasn't violent. He doesn't believe Woodruff could have killed the Indigenous leader.
We've just been in shock, and so it's been pretty traumatic to hear, and it seems really unrealistic. It just felt like it was a scam because there's no way this person seemed capable of that.
While police named Woodruff as their main suspect, local media report police are investigating other theories about the crime, including another suspect altogether. In a statement, police say they're investigating Woodruff's body for gunshot residue to see if he fired the gun that killed the medicine woman. Natalie Collada, CBC News, Toronto.
Let's take a closer look now at the Peruvian tribe and the remote village, now a focus of this double murder investigation. The Shipibo Canibo have existed for thousands of years. Almost 40,000 of them live in a corner of eastern Peru, modern-day guardians of the Amazonian rainforest. Many have died defending their land against the onslaught of illegal loggers and the palm oil industry, fighting to keep alive their rich culture and traditional knowledge through textiles, arts, and singing medicine. Part of the healing ceremonies involves the use of ayahuasca, a natural drug that produces intense psychedelic effects. As for the murders, still lots of questions about what exactly happened. Prosecutors in the region saying that they won't rest until their investigation is complete. Here's a look now at what else is coming up on The National. A manhunt underway in Nashville right now after another mass shooting. Why police seized the gunman's rifle but then had to give it back. And our Go Public team follows up on their investigation into upselling at Canada's big banks. After a national review, employees tell us they're still being pressured to push things you don't need.
But first, the last Liberal convention before next year's federal election is overshadowed by allegations of misconduct by a rising star in the caucus. Ontario MP Frances Drouin is facing an accusation of assault, which seems to stem from an alleged incident in Halifax this weekend where the party was gathering to talk policy and, as it turns out, devoting time talking about sexual misconduct. Here's David Cochran.
This weekend was supposed to be a celebration for the Liberals, but it's now about an investigation into an allegation of sexual assault against a Liberal MP. Eastern Ontario MP Frances Drouin issued a statement confirming an allegation has been made against him. It is important for individuals to have a safe environment to come forward, share their stories, and be supported. While no charges have been laid against me, I am cooperating fully with the investigation. The incident allegedly happened in downtown Halifax in the early hours of Saturday morning. Police say it was shortly after 2 a.m., but aren't saying anything else.
De Glengarry Prescott Russell, Frances Drouin.
There were no obvious signs at the convention that anything was wrong.
So we will be discussing running a family farm with...
In fact, on Saturday afternoon, about 12 hours after the alleged incident, the 34-year-old rookie MP was on the convention's main stage, moderating a panel discussion on farming. The Liberals also held a workshop to deal with this very issue, called From Me Too to Never Again. The Prime Minister personally attended it.
Ongoing part of an important conversation. It's not one group attending one session is going to make all the difference, but it's a step further in the right direction, and I'm glad we're having this.
Having your former minister there attend here. David Cochran joins me now from Ottawa. David, does the Prime Minister's office have anything to say about this?
Well, right now, first of all, I have to say we don't know anything about the specifics of the allegations. It's important to point out there are no charges against Frances Drouin. This is an allegation. So the Prime Minister's office isn't saying anything right now. They've referred all of our questions to the party whip's office. The whip is the person who imposes discipline on the caucus. All they are telling us right now is that tonight Frances Drouin is still a member of the Liberal caucus. Adrian?
This is not the first time we've asked Justin Trudeau about allegations of sexual harassment or assault against one of his MPs.
Yeah, they've unfortunately, from their point of view, I guess, had a fair amount of experience of dealing with this sort of thing since Justin Trudeau has become the leader of the Liberal Party. In those years, 4 Liberal backbench MPs, 2 Liberal cabinet ministers, and 1 member of the Prime Minister's personal staff have faced allegations of one sort of another on some kind of sexual misconduct. And just to walk you through that, 3 of the 4 backbenchers are either now out of caucus or out of politics entirely, the 4th being Drouin, who is still in the caucus. The cabinet ministers, one is Hunter Tutu, is out of cabinet, out of caucus, sitting as an independent. Kent Hare is the other cabinet minister. He's out of cabinet, still in caucus, but still under investigation. And the staff person I mentioned quit his job in the Prime Minister's office to avoid being a distraction. So this is an issue the Prime Minister says he takes quite seriously. Unfortunately for Justin Trudeau, it's an issue he's also had to deal with quite frequently.
Okay, David Cochran, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Of course, it's not just the world of politics dealing with sexual misconduct allegations. CBC News has been investigating sexual harassment in the airline industry for a while. 4 years ago, CBC revealed Air Canada had privately warned its pilots to leave the pornography at home away from the flight deck. Well, that story prompted a female pilot to come forward and say the problem of sexual harassment at the airline extended far beyond illicit material.
There are a minority of individual male pilots that perhaps are leaving that material to send a message to the women that they're not welcome.
She wasn't prepared then to publicly reveal her identity. Now she is, speaking exclusively to Diana Swain ahead of a Canadian Human Rights Tribunal hearing tomorrow into her complaint of sexism.
Nearly 30 years ago, Jane Clegg was one of only 2 women in her class to get her Royal Air Force wings, quickly assigned to Ottawa, flying the Prime Minister, foreign heads of state, even the royal family. She later became chief of the Canadian Forces Flight Training School in Moose Jaw, developed safety protocols for Transport Canada, but longed to do this: fly a commercial airliner.
The first day that I put on my airline uniform and took the controls of the 737, was also an extraordinarily proud day for me.
And she'd been doing it for 10 years. She says ignoring the porn and the crude jokes as the price of being a female pilot when she got into an angry disagreement with a male captain over whether they needed extra fuel before taking off. She believes his response was really about gender, and ultimately she was reassigned to a different flight. For her, that's when the issue of sexism crossed the line into safety.
The misogynistic behavior, in my opinion, was starting to impact on the safety of flight.
She says pilots who don't trust each other are a safety issue at 30,000 feet.
There is no workplace in the world that can have less tolerance for distraction than being a commercial airline pilot.
But she didn't file a formal complaint, believing the airline could simply agree not to schedule them together. Air Canada says without a complaint, it viewed the problem as a personality conflict, not one of harassment. And that's why it says it told her to use the company's book-around system if she didn't want to work with them anymore. It meant the onus was on her to switch her flights, sometimes to lesser routes, for less pay.
I know there are female pilots at Air Canada who are altering their own personal work schedules to avoid having to share the small confines of an aircraft flight deck with somebody who's treating them inappropriately.
Air Canada says it has a zero-tolerance policy for harassment and wouldn't have suggested she work around the male pilot if they'd known she considered their conflict about gender. Clegg claims the situation became untenable and she quit, and will argue in front of a public tribunal tomorrow that Air Canada hasn't done enough to address sexism within its pilot ranks. Still, she wants her job back.
I don't think Air Canada is unsafe. I don't think Air Canada wanted me to feel I had no other choice than to leave, but I don't think they truly appreciate the impact that misogyny has on their female pilots.
Air Canada employs more than 3,500 pilots, barely 200 of which, or 6%, are female. It says that's better than the industry average. Diana Swain, CBC News, Toronto.
Tomorrow's hearing comes at a time when flight attendants across North America are speaking out about an industry they say is rife with harassment. Last month, the union representing Air Canada flight attendants complained they had to model new uniforms for their managers, calling it a sexualized fashion show. The airline says it has a zero-tolerance policy for sexual harassment and discrimination, and it doesn't have a systemic problem. WestJet is facing a complainant, too. A former attendant, Mandalina Lewis, filed a proposed class action lawsuit 2 years ago, claiming the airline failed to create a safe work environment for female employees. WestJet has said it will not comment while the matter is before the courts.
Canada's banking regulator launched an investigation last year into sales practices at the big banks after our Go Public team revealed the widespread pressure on bank employees to upsell customers on everything from credit cards to investments. Now, some bank employees say one of the regulator's key findings is simply wrong. Erica Johnson joins us with the latest Go Public investigation.
We're concealing the identity of this CIBC financial advisor because she's worried about her job. She says staff at her branch are in disbelief over a key finding in a recent investigation into sales practices at Canada's big banks.
I can't even explain to you how disheartened we all were.
Over 6 months last year, the banking regulator, the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada, interviewed some 600 bank employees from the country's 6 big banks, reviewed 100,000 pages of bank documents, 4,500 complaints. In its recent report, the regulator said it found a sharp focus on sales that can increase the risk of mis-selling to customers, but also said it did not find widespread mis-selling.
Now that this report has come out, the pressure is 100% full force. It's every single day. How many products did you sell?
She and several employees at other banks say, contrary to the report's finding, they are causing harm to many customers, pushing products to meet sales targets.
You go home and you know that you told somebody that they needed to put their money into an investment because you had gaps that needed to be filled.
In an email, CIBC told Go Public the actions described are not representative of our culture, which is focused on putting our clients at the center of all we do. Michelle Bechtold believes she's a victim of the bank's sharp focus on sales. A teller at her BMO branch recently sold her on a complimentary upgrade to her credit card that turned out to have a higher interest rate.
Had I never said yes to this teller, to this day I would still have my gold 13.9% credit card. But because I said yes to this teller, I am now trapped with this 19.9% problem.
BMO has apologized and given Bechtold $150. This consumer advocate says the bank regulator's report was too vague and questions that mis-selling wasn't widespread.
Based on the content of the report and the tone of the report, we're unconvinced.
And as you can see, Erica's in our Vancouver newsroom. Tell us about the industry's response to these bank employees saying that they're still under pressure to push products.
Well, the Canadian Bankers Association sent Go Public a statement, and they said that all banks have high ethical standards and that when mistakes happen, they try to fix them quickly. However, they didn't address what you just mentioned, this pressure that bank employees say they are under to upsell customers.
And more to come in your investigation.
Yeah, the Deputy Commissioner for the banking regulator said she's actually glad that this issue has been raised in the media because she wants people to know that banks are a sales environment and may not be acting in your best interest. She also said that later this year, the regulator is going to be doing some mystery shopping inside banks, so that'll be interesting. And the regulator wants to hear from any bank employees confidentially, she says, if they have concerns about selling. The FCAC, the regulator, wants to hear from them.
Thanks, Erica.
Thank you.
And if you have a story you want investigated, you can email gopublic@cbc.ca. Here's what else we're working on tonight on The National. Healing Through Helping. We'll take you to a packed volunteer firefighting course in Nipawin, Saskatchewan, the community just minutes away from the site of the Humboldt Broncos bus crash.
Before coming to speak in front of sold-out crowds in Toronto, Fran Lebowitz sat down with me in New York. We talked about the Me Too movement, gun control, and, of course, Donald Trump.
And the hero who threw himself at a man with an assault rifle.
I chose to react because I didn't see any other way of me, living. And that's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to live.
His story is next on The National. On The National tonight, the aftermath of an especially ruthless suicide attack in Kabul. The targets were people registering to vote for upcoming parliamentary elections. At least 57 were killed, more than 100 others injured. ISIS has claimed responsibility. And here at home, 2 months after a 3-year-old boy was swept into a swollen river in southwestern Ontario, his mother says the search is over. Rushing floodwaters separated Caden Young from his mother. After she escaped from their minivan, that led to an intense search, and the outpouring of support continued today.
I came here today to say goodbye, some closure myself.
It's devastating, but it's shocking, relief, sadness, mixed emotions.
The body of the toddler recovered downstream from where Caden disappeared, but police say they will not identify the remains until after an autopsy. That is scheduled to begin tomorrow.
In the U.S., an intense manhunt is underway tonight after a deadly shooting rampage at a Nashville restaurant. Police are out in force searching for the gunman who killed 4 people before being disarmed by a heroic customer. But there are questions tonight about why the gunman had that assault rifle in the first place. CBC's Paul Hunter now on the revelation that that assault rifle was once seized, then given back.
In a country where mass shootings seem almost normalized, consider this one at a Waffle House restaurant in Nashville overnight, and a suspect identified as Travis Reinking.
Reinking entered the restaurant and got out of the truck nude except for a green jacket.
He shot a customer who was about to go in the door
and then he shot my friend who was trying to get away on the sidewalk.
Using this AR-15 assault-style rifle, the shooter killed 4 people and wounded 4 others before being lunged at by this man, James Shaw, now hailed as a hero.
He was either reloading or the gun jammed or whatever happened. The gun was kind of jammed up and it was pushed down, so we were scuffling. And I managed to get him with one hand on the gun, and then I grabbed it from him and I threw it over the countertop.
The suspect then fled, but as authorities hunted for Reinking, they discovered he was already known to police.
We have learned that Reinking was arrested by the United States Secret Service for being in a restricted area near the White House in July of 2017.
Charged for hopping what's known as the bike rack fence outside the White House perimeter, Reinking never made it to the actual grounds. He's said to have wanted a meeting with Donald Trump. That was enough for authorities to then seize guns in Reinking's name at the family home in Illinois, among them the AR-15 used in Nashville. But as is legal in Illinois,
the guns were returned by Tazewell County authorities to Reinking's father, who has now acknowledged giving them back to his son.
The whole story has ignited yet again calls for tougher gun laws in this country.
We need comprehensive gun reform to address mass shootings, domestic shootings, accidental shootings, and homicides.
Police say they suspect mental health issues, but one of the witnesses was less circumspect, calling the shooter a lunatic in a pickup truck. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
Still ahead on The National, what will it take to break Putin's grip on Russia? Chris Brown speaks to an opposition leader about the future of activism in that country.
And she has seen a lot and talked a lot, but Fran Lebowitz says the world still surprises her.
I was as shocked by what's happened, like with this Me Too movement, as I was by the Trump election, because it never occurred to me it would change.
Our conversation next. A lot of people might just envy Fran Lebowitz. For decades, she has made a living by saying exactly what's on her mind in a style that's all her own. Fran Lebowitz hit the spotlight in the 70s when Andy Warhol made her a columnist for his magazine Interview. Her first 2 collections of essays put her on the cultural map, but a serious case of writer's block turned Lebowitz into a talker,
There's always something to complain about.
making her famous for her opinions.
What's your idea of people who run around trying to get exercise?
I really don't think that the average law-abiding citizen should be confronted by a herd of overweight adults wearing lime green suits.
She made a career of offering up controversial social commentary.
One of the differences between children and adults is that when children don't get something, they ask. When adults don't get something, they become Republicans.
There's nothing about him.
These days, Lebowitz is just as acidic when it comes to President Trump.
Sometimes I sit on the subway. I think to myself when the doors open, whoever comes in the store first is going to be would be a better president than Donald Trump.
Or the Me Too movement.
Do I think that, men would prefer this wasn't happening? Yes, I do.
I met up with her in the only place on earth she says she would ever live, New York City, ahead of her sold-out talks in Toronto this weekend to talk about the state of, well, just about anything. I guess my first question is the most basic one. How are you? What's rattling around in your head today?
This is, I'm sure everyone says this to you. All we think about is Donald Trump.
Why does it preoccupy you so much?
Because it's horrible. Like, it's less horrible for you, but if you're an American, you can't believe it. You just can't believe it. And it's not like I didn't live through other terrible presidents. It's totally preoccupying, and it changes second by second.
Well, it does. We're in a moment now where one of the conversations is just maybe North and South Korea will decide to call the whole thing off and make nice, and he'll be on his way to collect a Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes, this is not something I believe, by the way. All right, I don't believe any of this. No one is easier to play than Donald Trump. No one. There are newborn babies who are more savvy than Donald Trump. I don't believe it. Let me put it that way.
I hear you, what you're saying about him being played, but yet he's in the White House. And I've heard you talk before about not seeing that coming. Is that true?
Oh, 100%. And believe me, I mean, I always felt before the election that in a profound way, my profession was being right all the time. I believe myself to be right all the time. And people have always said to me, you're the only person I know who in the middle of an argument just goes, you're wrong. You know, because I've always felt this tremendous confidence in how right I am. Yet, I spent the entire year before the election going all around the country telling thousands of people, don't worry, there's zero chance he could win. And I absolutely, of course, I believe that. Zero chance.
So how do you rationalize that? As you say, I mean, you spent a career being right, and you were wrong.
No, I'm wrong, really wrong. Here's the thing, it's not that I didn't know. Well, first of all, the one thing everyone seems to disregard, you know, there is Russia to contend with here, which I certainly didn't know about, all right? And, you know, that, I mean, I don't know if we're ever going to find out exactly, you know, but it certainly had a real effect on the election. So I didn't know about that. I knew there were a lot of stupid people in the country. I've lived here my whole life, you know. I didn't realize there were that many. I also, you know, I watched those campaign, whatever he calls them, those rallies, you know, and, you know, why is there all that emotion at those rallies? And that emotion is apparently the sheer happiness in being able to express your bigotry, which you've had to kind of keep under cover the last, you know, 40 years in this country.
So is this a bit of a preview of what it would be like in Toronto? Because I'm so curious for you to go there. I mean, it was scheduled for one night, sold out. So now there's another night. What do you think they want from you?
Truthfully, no matter where I go, even Australia, you know, since Trump, it's like 90% what people want to talk about.
Any thoughts for Prime Minister Trudeau? For or about him?
Well, I remember his mother around town quite a bit.
How so?
Because she was around New York all the time, you know, in her younger days. She was at Studio 54, you know, she was, I believe she's older than me, but not enough older for me not to remember her being around. You know, there is not a leader in the West who I would rather have. So ask me, would I rather have Justin Trudeau president? Yes. I'd rather have Margaret Trudeau president, you know, even the old Margaret Trudeau. So, you know.
Why is that?
Because we have Donald Trump.
Well, I mean, it can't just be anyone other than Donald Trump.
Yes, it could be practically. I mean, it practically could be.
This past Friday, American high school students protested against gun violence. It was the 19th anniversary of the Columbine school shooting and comes in the shadow of Parkland, too. Fran Lebowitz seems to commend the attempt at change, but there's doubt there. When you talk about young people, we're in a moment, though, where young people are grabbing hold of the agenda. Think about those kids from Florida, from that school.
I think it's great, but first of all, those kids from Florida, you know, it's my fondest desire that this succeeds. It will not.
Why not?
Because we have gun nuts in this country that are, it's so shocking, their love of the gun. It isn't what they say it is, you know, the Second Amendment. You know, they love these guns.
But isn't it possible that this is generation change, that these kids have decided, you know, the usual route to X may be all the way like this, but no, we're going this way.
And do what? And do what? I mean, the ones that are old enough to vote, they can vote. Florida has some of the worst gun laws in the country, worse than Texas. Okay, so they live in a state where the majority of adults who voted for people who want these laws.
So what would you say to these kids?
I would say it's great what they're doing, and I hope they succeed, okay? But if you're asking me if I think they're going to succeed, not this group.
I know, or I suspect it doesn't much matter to you how people compare you or characterize you, because you're your own woman. But it is interesting to me, you know, Wikipedia made reference to you as sort of a modern Dorothy Parker. My mom says, no, that's not true. Fran Lebowitz is a thinker who talks. And I'm wondering which one is closer.
Well, both flatter me. I'm certain Dorothy Parker also thought, you know,
I mean, she lived in a different world, obviously. There are very few women to compare women to, you know, and especially when I was young, there are more now. Some people are now compared to me. So comparisons are not very often that accurate, but, you know, I'm happy to be compared to Dorothy Parker.
Hard to talk with women and not talk about what it's been like to be a woman, to battle on before the Me Too movement, to be publicly, persistently objectified, and worse. So we pulled a clip of Lebowitz on CBC back in 1978, where a chat about her success became a tease about men and babies.
You know, I'm all ready to fill my leisure hours, if I had them.
What happens if you fall in love and settle down and find something you want to do, like having children or stuff?
Terribly unlikely. I'm not considering that as a possibility.
Ah, but is it likely to happen to her, Mr. Mystique?
Of course, maybe later this evening.
So you're a good sport. You had a good laugh at that. But I look at this through a lens of 2018 now, and I just cringe.
This was the world, in my opinion, until like 2.5 months ago. I mean, this has been the last like a year or so of total shocks. I was as shocked by what's happened, like with this Me Too movement, as I was by the Trump election, because it never occurred to me it would change. It never occurred to me it would change, because truthfully, I mean, there's been some changes, but basically, the way, you know, the world was for women was the same since, you know, Eve until 2 months ago. And then in 2 seconds, it changed.
Is this going to make a difference? Is the Me Too movement actually going to make a difference?
Absolutely. It's already made a difference. If you're asking me, is it going to make things equal, really? No.
I'm curious, I sort of watch what's happening in the media, in film, and publishing, and sports, but what about the women who are working in insurance companies in small towns or working for construction companies?
Yeah, the problem is, here's the thing. The men that got caught in New York, like Harvey and Charlie Rose and people like that, these are men who are very powerful. They didn't just have power over women, they have power over other men, okay? But most men in the world have no power, you know, other than the power they have over women. That is all the power they have. By women, I mean their own wife, their own girlfriend. These are the women that people should pay attention to. You know, these are the women who really are in peril all the time.
Do you think that we are also maybe in an era of a backslide in human rights? I'm talking gay rights and abortion rights too. I mean,
that is much more important, in my opinion, by the way, because abortion rights really are women's rights.
I don't know what is living in the pipes behind us here, but it's
Steam.
trying to get out, whatever it is.
Steam.
I guess my last question is I don't, is that really steam, or
Steam.
is there like
this
an
is
animal in there?
No, this is steam, and this is, if you have an apartment that is this kind of heat, you can't wait to hear this because it means the heat's coming on. So to me, this is a lovely sound.
You're a good sport. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so there is nothing gray about Fran Lebowitz's world, obviously, Ian. It is black or white. Her opinions are as firm as they were in the 70s, and she is not bending.
I'm sure some viewers are thinking of her as fearlessly confident, others maybe smug, but I mean, is she still making predictions? Because she admitted that she's been wrong over the last few months on some big things.
A couple things, for sure. Absolutely, I said to her, okay, Donald Trump, 1 term, 2 term. I'm hearing so many people say they feel 2 term, and she said, no. She doesn't believe he will even last this term. So again, that's her line in the sand. She's not afraid of making it.
And was that just steam?
It was just steam.
All right. You can watch and share Adrian's interview on our YouTube page, and you can find much more on our social feeds, powerful images on Instagram, exclusive video on Facebook, and you can always tweet us, like right now, at CBC The National. Tensions between Russia and the West escalated 9 days ago when the U.S.-led missile attacks on Syria occurred. That's why an informal meeting of the UN Security Council was held yesterday at a farmhouse in Sweden.
There was a week of great tensions, of great dangers, and we had to bring down the temperature. So the first outcome was bring down the temperature. And the second outcome was, let's talk about what unites us rather than what divides us on Syria.
Relations with Russia seem dangerously tense. The confrontation over chemical weapons in Syria, just the latest sore point, and it seems inevitable there will be many more. Next month, Vladimir Putin will be sworn in for a new 6-year term as president. So what should the West expect from him going forward, and what should the response be? Our Russia correspondent, Chris Brown, put that question to one of that country's foremost opposition figures, Vladimir Milov. The 46-year-old politician was once a member of Putin's government, but later threw his support behind his nemesis, anti-corruption crusader Alexei Navalny. Chris spoke to Vladimir Milov in Moscow this week for our latest dispatch.
How would you describe Russia's place in the world today under Vladimir Putin?
Isolation. Russia keeps getting more and more isolated. This is something unprecedented, even for me as a person who remembers the Soviet times, because yes, there was a standoff with the West, but we had Helsinki Accords, we had summits, and we had dialogue and so on. Right now, Russia is being pushed on the sidelines, less than 2% of global GDP. It's quite clear that the gap in development, in innovation grows between us and the developed world. There is no perspective of improving relations with the civilized world for years to come if Putin stays in power. We are just a small player on the global economic scale, so that is very frustrating.
How do you think Russians see this dynamic that you've just described to me?
I think it is being hidden from the majority of the population because more than 90% of Russians get their information from the television, and that is completely state-controlled. And there they propagate the idea that we have been achieving one geopolitical victory after another, so we are successful on TV. But they are being brainwashed daily on the television, and you actually need to somehow push through this.
I'm curious, do you personally believe that Russia is to blame for all of this, for this isolation, or do you think the West is to blame for it?
I'm kind of biased, you know, because I've been observing this thing from a close range. I'm a former bureaucrat. I attended the 2002 G8 summit in Canada as part of the official Russian delegation, which was the first official summit when Russia was participating as a full-fledged member of the G8. I personally remember the enthusiasm with which we were greeted there. And people from the biggest developed countries, the officials, the ministers were saying, look, welcome in. We're glad you're here to participate in the solution of global problems. And I saw how step by step, basically, it was Putin's actions that put the cracks in the pavement of our relations with the United States, with the European Union. There was one conflict after the other.
What do you think Putin's goals are for the next 6 years?
To maintain the grip of control, and actually increasing the control of strategic commanding heights in the economy, continuing to penetrate in Russia's neighborhood. I think if you are to name just one reason why relations are so bad between Russia and the West now, it's because of Russia's fixation on total dominance over the post-Soviet neighborhood. Primarily Ukraine, because that's a jewel in the crown. If you do not control Ukraine, you do not control post-Soviet space. So strengthening the grip of control, increasing his international penetration and dominance over areas which he thinks are his, that will be 6, 12, however more years we will have this gentleman in power.
What is the time frame, do you think, before, you know, liberals, people who are not like Putin, get a chance to do something?
Well, look, as I know history of Russia very well, and we actually have a habit of maintaining this quasi-stability for many, many years, and then bang, something happens because of the inefficiencies accumulated. But I think if you talk to many people, some of them not really engaged in politics, a lot would tell you that, you know, something is building up. This situation cannot linger. It will explode at some point. This is why I do not believe that Putin will have to maintain the grip on power forever, and I believe that actions of those who disagree can make a difference. We saw that last year during Navalny anti-corruption protests, which were, I would say, unprecedented in scale since 1991. But the scale was still not enough to turn things around, so we need to work on the capacity. But important thing is component is whether the Russian society wakes up.
And G7 foreign ministers and security ministers gathered today in Toronto, their first meeting since those missile attacks on Syria. Canada's Chrystia Freeland chairing the meeting, where much discussion was focused on Russia's involvement in Ukraine and Syria. Sources said the group will maintain a tough line on Russia while leaving the door open to cooperation.
Still ahead on the National, just 20 minutes away from the intersection where 16 people lost their lives earlier this month, a training course today for volunteer first responders. Next, you'll meet the people who just had to show up.
It's going to take a lot of time to keep improving, but at least we're stepping forward, not backward.
Here are some of the stories we're following this week on The National. On Friday, leaders of North and South Korea will meet for the first time in more than a decade. This historic face-to-face summit will take place in the so-called Freedom House in the demilitarized zone. It comes after a surprising announcement last week by Kim Jong-un promising to stop nuclear and long-range missile tests.
For you, Donald Trump's election sort of crossed a line.
I wouldn't say it's just because of Donald Trump, but Donald Trump kind of makes it click in your head that this actually has a much wider impact.
Former Cambridge Analytica employee Christopher Wiley will testify this week in front of the U.S. Congress, looking into meddling in the 2016 election. He is the Canadian who came forward to blow the whistle on the now infamous data analytics firm, which improperly obtained millions of Facebook users' data. Brett Kissel is just one of the Canadian country music stars who will headline a tribute concert for the Humboldt Broncos Friday night in Saskatoon. Juno winners Dallas Smith and Gord Bamford will appear. All proceeds will be donated to the families affected by the bus crash earlier this month. That crash has shone new light on the emotional strain faced by volunteer firefighters who are often the first on the scene of a tragedy. Olivia Stefanovic shows us how they're learning to lean on each other.
Every move matters. Every second counts to save lives. It can be draining, physically and mentally.
When you rolled up on scene and put eyes on this, I would be pretty concerned.
Does that stick with you?
It depends on what the patients look like. If the patients are all fine and they're walking, talking, whatever, great, not a problem. I don't really care what the carnage looks like in terms of vehicles. It's the patients. That's what we're here for.
People here are more keenly aware of that emotional impact in the wake of the deadly Humboldt Broncos bus crash. 16 people were killed. Volunteer firefighters were on the front lines. The team was headed to Nipawin, where this clinic is being held. The connection is not lost on anyone here. 18-year-old Andrew Sutherland is gearing up for the challenge.
You can have so much stress because we're volunteers between your home life, your work life, and then you got your job, the volunteer job life, and you can't let that bottle up.
That's why the Saskatchewan Volunteer Firefighters Association has created its own program to train its members to talk to their peers and spot signs of emotional distress.
If we'd have had this opportunity for the help years ago, probably it would have been a lot easier.
Ross Deptuk says he struggled after responding to a collision that he thought involved his brother.
When you think it's your brother or your family, it's just like the fire family. It really, really hurts deep.
Deptuk is studying to make sure no one else goes through the same experience.
It's going to take a lot of time to keep improving, but at least we're stepping forward, not backward.
There are about 40 peer counselors across Saskatchewan. Now 20 more volunteer firefighters are training to join them, to be on call for a different kind of emergency. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Nipawin, Saskatchewan.
Before we go tonight, one more story that got us talking. Straight Outta Compton, the title of a rap album, sometimes used as an insult, and now a point of pride. Kendrick Lamar has been a bright light from that infamous California city since his debut album, Good Kid, Mad City, a tribute to the troubled streets he knew. Now the spotlight has grown even brighter. Last week, Lamar became the first popular artist to win a Pulitzer Prize for music. Back in Compton, at his old high school, they are celebrating the prize by celebrating the music and the message that good things come out of Compton. That is our moment of the day.
I get way too petty once you let me do the extras. Pull up on your block, then break it down, we playing Tetris.
The word Compton to other people, they think it's just ghetto, you know, like they don't think nothing comes out of it. But we got The Game, we got Kendrick, like showing success, like good things could come out of Compton and people just don't know that.
When I first found out about the award he won, I actually didn't even know what the award was. So when I learned that he was just almost reached the class on his own, and since I know he's walked the same halls as me, I feel like I can do the same.
So that was from our journalist in LA, Zuleka Nathu, and she has a piece online about this. And Ian, she talks in it in part about how the school is filled with all these positive messages about, you know, stay positive, dream big, and how important it is, because this is still a place where all the extracurricular activities have to happen in daylight. They still have major issues there.
Extraordinary, of course, that in a place as affluent as the United States, that there are so many neighborhoods where kids can't go out at night safely, right? Yeah. But there is something universal about band. I'm sure a lot of people watching thinking back to their band experience, but back in the 70s, in my junior in high school, we thought we were really cool when we played the Hawaii Five-0 theme, not Kendrick Lamar.
Is that why you still do it?
Yeah, so maybe not so cool. Anyway, what a nice little piece of video, and thank you very much for watching The National for April 22nd. Good night.